The Center for Audit Quality presents Profession in Focus.
Hello, and welcome to this edition of Profession in Focus. I'm Cindy Fornelli, the Executive Director of the Center for Audit Quality, and I'm very pleased today to have as our special guest Liban Jama, who is the Senior Advisor for the PCAOB's Division of Enforcement and Investigations.
Thank you so much. Greatly appreciate you having me here today.
Well, we're pleased to have you, but before we get into the substance of our questions, I do believe there's a special message that you need to give our audience.
Absolutely. Today, the views that I express are my own. They do not necessarily reflect the views of the board or the board staff.
Liban, you've been in your role for just over a year, and I'm curious to get your perspectives on what you see the issues that are coming up or current issues that you see happening at the PCAOB, particularly in enforcement and investigations.
Sure. Well, Cindy, before I answer your question, I'd like to take a moment. It has been a year, and it's been a very active year. And I'd like to say that I feel privileged and honored to be working for Director Modesti, who does an outstanding job in leading the division. And I'm also honored to be working with such a wonderful staff every single day. We have a dedicated group of 65 people, both accountants, lawyers, and other support professionals that work every day to protect investors and enhance audit quality. I'm honored to work with them every single day. The Division of Enforcement is focused on 4 areas right now, which we call our higher priority areas. First, lack of skepticism. Second, focusing on independence issues. Third, we're focusing on integrity, the integrity of the board processes. And then fourth, we've been focusing more and more on cross-border activities.
So let's talk a little bit about the cross-border activities. I know that, as you said, is a primary focus area, and as companies and as our markets become more complex and more global, tell us how that manifests itself at the PCAOB and in your inspections and enforcement cases.
Well, primarily in the enforcement arena, we see the risks that are essentially emerging in this space as more and more companies are having audit firms represent them in terms of their international affiliates and doing a lot of the work overseas. So we see those risks rising associated with corporate governance issues in the issuer community. But in the Division of Enforcement here at the PCAOB, we focus more on the audit conduct and essentially the risks of audit. So a lot of the issues in the cross-border space really focus from our perspective on whether these firms, particularly these foreign affiliates, are following the standards that the board puts out. And so that's an area of focus of ours, and it continues to grow as time continues to move forward.
So let's talk a little bit about process at the PCAOB and in DEI. How do you initiate an enforcement action? What are the processes you go through? Because they're not public, I think there's a little bit of mystery around them, and so I think our viewers might benefit from hearing the general processes that you go through.
Sure. The way I'd like to describe our processes in terms of where we get our cases and how we start our cases is really 4 channels or 4 categories. The first area is really primarily from the referrals from our colleagues in DRI, the Division of Registration and Inspections. And then we also get a number of referrals from our colleagues in the Office of Research and Analysis. So those are internal divisions within the board, and we collaborate with those offices to be able to get information from them for matters that require or may be of interest for an enforcement perspective. We also get referrals from other stakeholders, the SEC. We also have our own public source analysis team internally at the PCAOB within the division. We have a fantastic group of professionals that focus on looking and mining data and information out in the public sphere. And then, of course, we've got our TIPS hotline, which people call in quite frequently, and we're able to get a significant amount of information from the TIPS hotline that helps us decide whether we should look into a particular registered firm or associated person.
Interesting. So I think that's helpful to understand those processes. So our final question, at the CAQ, we spent a lot of time working with the financial reporting supply chain on how to deter and detect financial reporting fraud. I know that's something that you at the PCAOB are also looking at, and it seems to me that we all have a common goal. We might approach these issues slightly differently, but we all have a common goal in trying to make sure our markets are safe and those who set out to do wrongdoing are deterred and detected relatively early on. So what is it that the regulatory community and the industry, whether it's the preparer community or the public company auditing profession, how can we work together more to help in that fight against fraud?
Communication, communication, communication. So I do think there needs to be a continuous dialogue among stakeholders in the regulatory community, as well as in the profession, and as well as in the issuer community. So throughout the life cycle of the financial reporting process. By having those dialogues and communication and meetings and interfacing, it allows for a two-way feedback in terms of our expectations, what we're looking for, and more importantly, informs us, particularly in enforcement of best practices or practices that are occurring within the space. So from my perspective, the most critical aspect of it is to continue to break down the silos within the profession and also in the regulatory community, to continue to have this two-way dialogue, not only in the standard setting process, but also enforcement. So from my perspective, more and more opportunities for that dialogue is a good thing. It'll bridge any differences and it'll mitigate risks down the road. So, and as we like to say, we have within the division and our leadership, Director Modesti does an outstanding job in communicating with the profession to let them know we're interested in hearing from you. And so we're very, 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 from our perspective, very interested in learning from the profession so that we are better informed and we're able to do our job to meet our two-part mission, which is to protect investors and to enhance audit quality, which I know auditors work towards doing every single day, and that's why they join the profession.
Well, I think having you join Profession in Focus is also a way to make sure we're having that dialogue. Liban, thank you so much for joining us today. It was really insightful and illuminating.
My pleasure.
I appreciate you taking the time. And that'll close this edition of Profession in Focus. Thanks to all of you for watching, and stay tuned for our next edition.